Hi, Oliver. Stephanie and I are so excited to have you on the show today. And we love talking with like-minded people. And we're so excited to learn about all of the wonderful energy work that you're doing in the world today. And before we get started in this conversation, one thing we like to ask our guests is, what is your non-negotiable to start each day?
Ooh, what's my non-negotiable? It's interesting because I'm very much a creative. So each day it's like different, there's different flows, but my non-negotiable really would have to be just time with myself, right? Potency, whether it's 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of just, no phones, no kids, like no distractions, and like, me, either in nature or getting the sun, or me in just, a quiet space before all the external stimuli start coming, and just being in touch with my energy, being like checking in, like, how am I, how, and kind of recharging a bit, but just so I know who I am and what's real and what's me before I jump into what could be an amazing day or a chaotic day or an exciting day, right? So for me, it's definitely a check-in, which requires complete shutdown, even if it's just for a minute, so that I can feel my authentic self.
Mm. That's, we've had a lot of guests say something similar with the morning routine, but the way you just put that all together as far as like why and like the intention behind it, I feel like it was really powerful. That's great advice for everyone. Yeah.
And then no distractions too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because sometimes
Because a lot of times, like, you go throughout the day, and the moment you wake up, you're on your phone, and you are reactive. You're reactive to an email, you're reactive to a bill, you're reactive to, someone needing something for you. And I'm not saying don't be reactive, but when you don't know who you are, when you don't know what centered feels like, then you might think the chaos is normal, right? But if you feel it first, then you're going to be like, oh, wow, I was just feeling great a second ago, and now I'm kind of not. Then you can be like, okay, let me go back to that. So at least you have the contrast, and you can be like, okay, that's not really mine, even though it feels real. That's not who I am at the core, and I can return back to who I am. Right?
Okay. That is powerful. What you just said, like getting back to your true essence in yourself, and like asking yourself, who are you? Yeah. And you have a 6-week-old in addition to 2 other boys. So if anyone can do this and take a little bit of time in the morning, if you can, I feel like all of our listeners out there with busy lives and lots of kids and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it doesn't
You can
take
do it
much.
too.
A lot of the time, people think that you need the an hour, 3 hour. And I know I've had dear friends that they meditate 3 hours a day every day for the last 7 years, and then their life's still the same. And a lot of times people miss out on, it's not about the length of time you're in something, it's about your intention, your potency, and little goes a long way. Because once somebody might take 3 hours to experience the silence, and they experience themselves. But once you experience that frequency, it should be easy for you to get back to it, because now you at least know what it is, so you can dial in and be like, that's what it is. That's what I want to experience, and I want to experience it quickly, right?
I mean, you can literally do this in 5 minutes, right? It's like setting aside the time, tuning in, taking away the distractions, and just getting what you need, tuning into your own frequency.
It can be fast, and that's what people don't realize. It's like, speed. A lot of times when it comes to energy work, spiritual work, speed can be your best friend in a lot of ways. And once you know what you're doing, and how you're able to reach, or tap into these higher states of consciousness that normally takes people a longer time to do. So I feel like there's also a faster path to that as well.
Yeah. And we can't wait to dive into all of this and more today. So Oliver, as we start this conversation, we'd love for you to share in a nutshell with our listeners your journey and how you got into energy work, became an energy healer and a spiritual activator, and maybe even describe what that is. And we're also just curious, like at what point in your life did you realize that you had these gifts, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting story, because I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing now. Like, it's the furthest thing from my mind. I mean, yes, looking back, it all makes sense. I grew up in a household where energy and spiritual gifts they're not something that's weird, right? I mean, my dad's gifted, my grandfather's gifted. I mean, I've heard about stories, seen it firsthand about, spiritual gifts running in the family, in a little bit more of a, religious setting. But I also grew up in the Philippines to where healers are, normal, like, and energy work, there's a lot of, really powerful stories of healers that came from the Philippines. So when I'm hearing these stories and these legends and my parents and everybody talking about it, I'm like, it's normal. So I grew up where it was normalized. And I think that was one of the best things that ever happened. It wasn't weird. It wasn't woo-woo. It was like, all right, that happens. I never showed any interest, but at least it was around me to where I'm like, okay, it's not something that would make me run away. Right.
Mhm.
So I think that created a great foundation. I never knew I was gifted. I thought I was flawed, broken, not worthy, all those different things. Inadequacy ran deep. So like for me, the thought of even being a healer and doing what I'm doing now, I would have never guessed. But when there's a calling, there's a calling, right? And it happens, and we can't really control when awakening happens and all that stuff. My background is mostly in business, right? Very successful in online businesses, building, selling businesses, so I was kind of set in my way, as far as like, I didn't need anything else. Look at business, got abundance, great. I found my purpose. I found what I'm here to do. I don't need anything. And that worked until it didn't. Till you have issues with business, issues in your relationship, issues with self-worth that you can't outrun. You can't bury yourself in business, that you can't escape it. It's facing you. And when it came to a point where things started to face me, I tried everything I can, because I'm mostly left brain. So I've tried, working with my mind, my emotions, rewiring it, all those different things. And not to say that they didn't work. I mean, I feel like there's progress, but it's not the kind that was consistent or the kind that was permanent. I was still having to address issues, and they would come up again after a few months. And it was like a hamster wheel of like, same problem, different day kind of thing. So for me, that's when the search for something, to help me, started. And I stumbled on energy work, and it worked when everything else failed, and it worked faster than anything else I've ever seen. And it was a one and done. A lot of things, when I started doing energy work and got to the root and the core of what's really blocking me, then those issues never showed up again. So for me, it was out of necessity to have a better life that I pursued learning it. And then the deeper I went, it was like, it started to where people could start seeing how my life changed. So naturally, I'm sharing it with my friends and family members, and sharing my gift with them. And then they'll bring their friends and family members. Next thing you know, I was living this double life of successful entrepreneur, for 10 years, for first 10 years, successful entrepreneur. And on the side, doing tens and thousands of sessions, with people that were coming, and there were like just referrals. And I'm like, it was like a secret life that I was living for a while. So I was like, in that world, you don't speak energy. It's all business, right? And I was afraid of being kicked out or judged or being an outcast. So yeah, that's kind of how it started for me. It was I craved it because I needed it. Then people around me saw the changes, and they and then they were curious. So I shared it. And then the word spread to where it got to a point where, I'm like, okay, I guess this is what I do on the side, but nobody can learn about it, right? So that was kind of like my introduction to it. It was never something that I wanted to do as purpose work as I'm doing now. It's something that I had to do for myself, and I felt called to do it for others, and it kind of just organically spread from there.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like a lot of people that get into this type of work, they have similar stories. So super interesting. And I'm wondering if you can share with our listeners, like, you're saying energy work and energy this and energy that, but like, what is that? What do you mean by energy work? And I know that energy, can get trapped in the body. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, people can be doing energy work without them knowing it, because thoughts have energies, emotions have energies, and physical conditions have certain energy. So everything is energy, and you can be like, working on your mindset, and you're like, and rewiring a limiting belief, and be doing energy work without knowing it, because everything has, energy attached to it. Right. So a lot of times I meet people that they've done energy work when they're doing breath work, like, and relaxing. It's a form of energy work. Or when they're meditating and trying to, find clarity, or be, or access a higher level of consciousness. That's energy work. I mean, energy is involved in it. So the way I do energy work is really being able to tap in to see where the blocks are, because people have blocks in their body. Like, if somebody has a traumatic life event that happens to them, like, it doesn't just go away. It gets stored in your body, and next thing you know, once it's stored in your body, like, it's affecting your thoughts, affecting the, how you feel. Next thing you know, you're attracting people who have the same resonance with that. So if you're like me, you were bullied, and then, and it would cause you heartache, and it caused an energy block of trauma in your heart. Next thing you know, you might be wondering, why am I attracting people with closed hearts, or narcissistic, or people that make me feel invisible, or aren't open to love? And that's because they exist in the same vibration that you're in, a closed heart. Therefore, they're showing up. And when you remove that, all of a sudden, like, the people that resonate there can't resonate with you anymore, because they can't do the dance with you. They're not in that same frequency. It's like changing the song on the radio, or changing the station. You might be listening to blues, and you change it and it's hip hop, or change it and it's jazz, change it and it's rock. I mean, it's all available there. It's like what you're tuning into. So on an energetic level, that's what happens, is like whatever, whatever blocks you have, whether it's conscious or it's mostly unconscious, that starts to attract people, problems, situations that are of similar frequency and nature to what you have within you, which can be caused by traumatic events. It can be caused by your environment. Some people, they're very sensitive to their environment, and their environment affects them more than they know. People, where they live, where they work. It could be gestational. It could be like, it's handed down to you based on the trauma that your mom experienced when you were in the womb, and it's affecting you. Or it can be generational. Your great grandparents had it, your grandparents have, your parents had it, and now you have it. And it's the same problem, the same pattern, passed on energetically. You didn't create it, but you're dealing with the ramifications of it, right? So there's a lot of different ways that energy blocks get handed down, right? And the most important thing is it's not important to know where, what's the inception point, or how it got there. It's not important at all, because you might never know. If it was created by your great grandparents, then you're gonna drive yourself nuts trying to figure out how did you create it when you weren't even there when it was created.
Right.
But the most important thing is there's a block. It was passed down. You have it. You got to remove it so you can move on, and you don't even have to know or revisit the trauma to move on. You just have to, not simply, but you have to be able to remove, or be open to removing the blocks that are holding you back.
So this is so fascinating to me, and I have so many questions, but I'm even thinking about, so the subject of energy in general is really fascinating to me. And I'm thinking about how you can walk into a room, and depending on who's in the room, there are people that literally suck the life out of a room, right? Or you walk into a room and somebody's like this bright light, and you just want to be around them because they have so much energy. Or, maybe you're crabby from something and you're sucking the life out of the room. Like, who knows what it is? But the energy that you're talking about is energy in the body, but this is all the same energy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can walk in the room, and depending on someone's level of how open they are to energy, they can walk in the room, and they might be what I call thinkers, to where they just know what someone's thinking. They're, oh yeah, they're sad, and they're going through some stuff, but they can't, it's not really jarring or throwing them off. They just know what someone's thinking. Or it can be someone who's a feeler, to where if someone's feeling anxious, they feel that energy, and their body produces the same emotion, to where they're feeling anxious the same way as the other person is, and then now they're like, I just can't be in crowds, or I can't be in airports and concerts, or in places where there are people, because they just absorb everything on an emotional level. And then there's embodiers, to where it's everything. They They know what someone's thinking, they know what someone's feeling. But if somebody has a shoulder pain, they have a shoulder pain as well, because the depth of their embodiment of energy and how it affects them is just so deep to where they feel it all. And it's hard for them to know what's theirs and what's not theirs, right? So that's one way of doing it, but you don't have to be in front of a person to be emotionally and energetically affected by them. I mean, a lot of times people are like, I'm thinking about this person randomly, they don't know why. Next thing you know, that person calls and they haven't talked to that person in a month or in a year. And they're like, wow, you just popped up, and they called or emailed out of nowhere. Because energy is energy. It travels faster than light. By the time you think about somebody, it's like you're energetically connected to them. And depending on how open or in tune you are with energy, you might be able to feel that or not. But it can happen when you're in front of somebody. It can happen when they're 1,000 miles away.
And you can almost manifest what you want. I mean, it's not that different from manifestation, right? Like it's all connected.
They're all connected. And a lot of people don't get it, to where if everything is energy, right? So when they get it, then you can be like, okay, if I had a choice between working on 50 traumas, right, that I've experienced, whether it's passed down to me, I don't know, or it's created by life events, right, or the energy of it. Because the thing about like 50 traumatic events, let's say for some reason the 50 traumatic events, each one of them, whether you're aware of them or not, leave an imprint in your heart. I would rather work on removing the block in the heart, because as I remove that, I'm removing 30 limiting beliefs energetically, 20 emotions that are disempowering in nature, and trauma. And I'm removing the effect on my body and my mind and my emotions without having to know what it is. But I just feel good. I'm just able to do it, versus having to go through each and every single one of them, relive them, try to figure out where they are, and at the end of the day still feel like I'm trapped. Right. So for me, I like energy because it's just a faster approach and a less traumatic when it comes to like being able to move forward. That makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And all these explanations and these stories that you've given are really helpful. I'm just thinking for someone who isn't as in tune with their energy. And, I personally have done work with energy healers, so I get it. But like we were talking about these energy blocks and these traumatic events. And what if someone doesn't realize that their feelings or their reactions to certain situations or events are because of, gestational or generational trauma or whatever these situations are? How can they tune into that blockage and help try to release it? And I know you have a book, and we can dive into that a little bit too. But for someone who's not as in tune with what's going on, but really curious when they're listening to this conversation today.
Yeah. Or can I add one more thing onto what she's asking? Even the person that's not curious and just believes it's a bunch of BS, but they have the energy blocks too. So can you address all of that?
There's probably a lot of those out there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because about 30% of the people that end up going to our workshops, they are the skeptical, they are the logical. I've got people that go there and they sit in the front row with a notebook, and I'm like, wow, they're so studious. They're like taking down every single thing I'm saying, and then they come to me afterwards and like, I feel so bad, because their lives has changed, and and they're like, everything's changed. But when I was writing notes, I was finding ways to disprove everything you're saying. But then by the end of the workshop, all these signs and things that come through to where it's irrefutable that there's no way you are right. And I've had people like that, and it's fun because the mind will challenge it, but the mind will never be ahead of it. The mind is always behind. Like, if you think about it, the mind is like, looking for proof, and energy lives in a different realm. It lives in a different realm to where the mind can't really understand it. It can only kind of get a glimpse of what's going on after it's done. So by the time the mind catches up, it's already done. So look at lottery winners. By the time the mind catches up, like, we really won the lottery, they already won the lottery. It was not a prerequisite for them to believe. Action was needed, of course, and you needed to buy the lottery tickets to win. So the action made a difference, sure, but the mind didn't need to be on board for the manifestation, for the blessing to come their way. You might even be skeptical and in denial, but it doesn't matter. It still happened. So those two things operate independently, the mind and energy. You can be extremely skeptical and still have everything happened and you still be in denial. And I met so many people like that, to where they're in denial and they're skeptical, even if things are happening to them. They're like, it doesn't work, until one day they start to believe, because they're like, there's no other option. There's no other way but to believe based on everything that they experience. So yeah, I mean, I deal with that all the time. And I think it's totally normal. It's actually, there's a healthy form of it, right? To where like, I'm skeptical. I don't know how this works, but I'm open. And a lot of the times as well, it's just like, even if somebody doesn't know they're working on energy, it happens all the time because we get signs, right? It's like, you know, someone's talking, you're talking to somebody and you're having a hard time standing in your power, and it frustrates you. And next thing you know, you're like, I got to be able to speak my truth. I have to be able to lay down boundaries. And eventually they gain the courage to speak their truth, which clears their throat chakra, stand in their power, and lay their boundaries, which clears their power center. And they didn't even know that they were doing that, but it doesn't matter, because a lot of times, you know, stepping up to the plate, acting, taking action, choosing to open your heart, choosing to forgive, choosing to do self-care, choosing to speak your truth, they don't seem spiritual, but they have extreme spiritual effects that clear your energy without you ever knowing that you're clearing energy. Because a lot of times when people think of clearing energy, you're thinking of, you know, a shaman with saging you, and you're in crystal, and you're levitating in the bed and all that crazy stuff. And it's simply not the case. We're energetic beings. So a lot of the things that we do that seem totally normal, from journaling to singing to creating to being, to being empathic, to wanting to help people, all these different things that we choose to do that are normal, have huge, energetic benefits. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the things that I do want to drill down to, where somebody can literally be clearing their energy in the best of ways and not know it, and never know it. And that's okay, because energy is not, a new term. It's just simply, a byproduct of what we are, and our thoughts, emotions, and how we live life. It all has this energetic component to it. So whether or not you know what it is, you believe what it doesn't matter. It's like oxygen. It's invisible. You might not need proof, but it's there, and it's helping you.
I think that's a great analogy. I heard you, I don't remember if it was in your book or on something else I listened to, but I remember you said that with the oxygen. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people, because a lot of people think energy work is, I do not like the word woo particularly,
Right.
but they think it's like not scientific. But so does that mean oxygen isn't scientific because you can't see it? Like it's,
Right.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of things we can't see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of friends in the science community, the brightest of minds, and in public, it's everything you would expect. They're teaching hospitals, they're doing presentations in big forums and all those different things. They've got papers written about them. They're great. Behind the scenes, they're completely energetic, but they'll never admit it because they'll know they'll be discredited. So they just don't. But
Right.
they're that. So a lot of the smartest minds that I met that are super like scientific, even medical field, to where they're like, whoa, they're like the geniuses of their time. A lot of them are into this, but they'll just never say it because of the public stigma that might come from it, and they just don't want it. So they hold it close to their chest.
That's so interesting. Do you think that some of this is cultural? Like you mentioned, you're from the Philippines, and that it was very normal in your culture and your family, but not as much in the US. And you hear about this more in different countries.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's cultural for sure, plays a part of it, but a lot of the times as well is I've seen it to where it comes and you just can't shake it off. Some people that have it's never in their culture. Something happens in their life, whether it's traumatic, tragic, or during a low point. And when you're in a low point, you never can predict when something comes up and lifts you up and opens your eyes. So you hear all these stories about people that had near-death experiences, and then they almost died, or they did die for a few minutes or a few hours. And then when they come back, all of a sudden they're able to do things that they were never able to do. Or when somebody gets a transplant, like in a heart transplant, and the next thing you know, they're having all these images and memories that weren't theirs. Come to find out, it was the donors, right? And how does that happen? Because even organs, have energy stored in them. They carry energetic memory. So that's what happens. It's one of the things that's like, how can you dispute that, right? You can't.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I think about that. So I don't eat red meat, but I do eat chicken. And I think about, the chickens that I'm ingesting, like, how were their lives? Were they humanely treated? Like, or am I eating food am I ingesting the energy of the food
Yep.
that had a terrible life? And I don't want to
Yep.
ingest that energy. Like, I think I think the trees have energy, and every living, breathing thing
Yeah.
has energy. So
And I like your point, and that's why, typically before I eat, what the doesn't matter if it's, veggies or a chicken, it's always the same. Is I want to clear my food. I want to set an intention to remove all toxic, fear-based energy and energies that's like, that's been experienced or passed down to what I'm eating. And I want to make sure I'm also sending love and blessing everybody that was a part of the creation, of this meal, like, bless them with love and all those different things, because I feel like energy can be transmuted. It can be elevated in higher levels to where it's not the same. Just because someone is depressed, they're depressed forever. It can elevate, and same thing with the food that we eat, right? It's like, it's because you can definitely tell if you have a waiter serving you and they're in a bad mood, you'll feel it, because their care, or the chef is sad and they're cooking your meal. You'll be able to feel a difference. All of a sudden you're like, what's going on? Right? Even though you're not able to kind of pinpoint it, but when you pay attention, you're like, wow, I wasn't feeling sad. Now I'm feeling sad. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they tell you their life, and they're like, whoa, right? Because energy gets transferred in food and water and what we drink, what we consume, in the bed that we lay down, everything. About when we start living consciously and realizing, yes, especially what you eat, because that's a faster acting than anything else. Is what you ingest. When it comes to energy, is when you start elevating the energy of it before you consume it, makes a difference.
Okay. I love that idea. And, I've heard, say you're grateful before you eat, or some people say like a prayer or something, but really I love what you just discussed, because you're right. I mean, you are consuming it, it's getting into your body. And so doing this sort of like energy clearing, if you will, seems to be such a simple, but yet, humbling, because there are a lot of people, and, you're eating an animal potentially, or the plants. And like you said, a lot of work has gone into the food getting to your plate. So
Yep.
I think what a great ritual to do.
And showing gratitude for that food and the people that brought the food to be. And I just read this book recently. I think it was called like Braiding Sweetgrass. I don't know if either of you have ever heard of it, but they talk about how, like, sometimes we think when we buy food, like strawberries, for example, we own the strawberries, right? There are strawberries, but really the strawberries own themselves, right? The strawberries belong to nobody, the earth, the plant that they grew in, and we're enjoying a gift of the strawberries by eating them. And I thought that was a really interesting way to think about the food that we eat and the earth and all the abundance that we have.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
So Oliver, we've talked a lot about energy. How can we protect our energy and sort of keep the negative energy away? Because obviously we want to hopefully, do some of the work, recognize when we have a little bit of blockage, but ultimately live a life where you're not getting, maybe we may be exposed to negative energy, but we're not letting it impact us as much.
Got it. Yeah. There's levels to it, for sure. Ultimately, like, your vibration is your protection. So ultimately you get to a place to where you work on yourself a lot, to where you don't need to protect yourself, because you're stronger, and things on a higher vibration, like, things from the lower vibration, they just don't show up at higher vibrations. Or if they do, they're so small to where you're just so resourceful to where it's dealt with in a second. But at the beginning, it's harder, because you don't know what you don't know. And the way I look at it, somebody can be drowning in a sea of energy, and that's what they're used to. So at the beginning, yes, you need to, it's important to protect yourself, because it's like the life vest that you throw when someone's drowning, and now they're not spending 99% of their time trying to survive. They can be like, have a breather. Then they get out of it, and they get used to not being in a drowning situation. Then it's out of their reality. It's only in the reality when it's happening. But like, when you're walking in land, and you're not even in any body of water, You're not thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid of drowning right now. You can't, because it's not even your reality. But for some people, you live most of their lives in the reality of drowning in energy. So I think protection is super important. There's lots of ways of doing it, from like, from buying crystals that, I like at the beginning, use as many training wheels as you can, because training wheels it gives you the opportunity to experience what it feels like, and then you can come back to it later without training wheels, or have it if you want to. I mean, it's like, again, the tools are here for a reason. So whether they're crystals and you're buying a smoky quartz, or or an obsidian, or something that absorbs negativity, and you put it right next to something like citrine that clears negative energy, so now you have a system, something that attracts a negative energy, or instead of it going to your body, it goes to the crystal first. So that's your line of defense, and then you have a crystal next to it that clears it. And whether you have that in your workspace, where you're sleeping, or in your purse, or as the necklace or a bracelet touching each other, now you're starting to think of it as a system of like, okay, I can absorb energy, but I don't have to. This can do it for me, and this can. So it could be crystals, it can be intentions, it can be doing things before you go out that raise your vibration, so you're a little bit of there's a lot of different ways to go about it, for sure. But protection is one of the things to where the beginning, it's all you think about till you realize who you are and be like, wow, you mean to tell me that this is me, and all the other things I was feeling thought today, they weren't even mine? And you can tell the difference of what's clear and what's you being bombarded, and you realize that's not normal. Me living this way, tired, and feeling these roller coaster of emotions randomly that I don't even have context for, it's not normal. This is normal. So you start seeing that, and you start getting motivated to live at a higher space, because it makes you feel better. Your quality of life and your quality of day increases, and you start demanding more for yourself than you did in the past.
I think you talked about this in one of your, either in a podcast or a book that I was listening to, but kind of an energy detox.
Yep.
And I love the analogy that you gave with the training wheels, because I think that's a great one. But just like you would with a food detox, you eliminate foods, and all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know I could feel this good. I thought this was normal to feel bloating and digestive issues, or, skin issues, or what have you. And with the energy, you get rid of those negative energy blockages, and all of a sudden you feel so much better, and you have more energy, and the anxiety goes away, and things like that. I think it's really powerful. And maybe we can dive in and talk about your book and a lot of the suggestions, and, the kind of the programs that you walk people through.
And here's his book for those of you on YouTube. It's called The Spiritual Activator. This is what the cover looks like. It's very pretty. I like it a lot.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Detox is the same thing as the same concept as people that go on a juice detox or a green juice detox, right? It's like over time, your body, has all these toxins that build up that affect your mental, emotional, physical well-being. And you do a detox to, flush them out so you feel better, right? That's the intention. And it's the same thing here. Is the way I look at it is, over time, there's a lot of blocks that you've absorbed from childhood till now that hold you back. And it almost feels like you're driving with emergency brakes on at times. And that's what it is. You really have this invisible barrier between you and what you want. And no matter what you do, you just simply can't get there, no matter how hard you try. And that's what a detox is. It is really removing a lot of these things that aren't you, so you can move forward, and whether that's abundance, whether that's relationships, whether that's internal peace, whether that's finding your purpose, whether that's feeling better physically. I've seen energy blocks affect all those areas and more. So a lot of it is the book has it's a 15-day process, and you can totally go longer of just how do you protect your energy? How do you clear energy if you absorb it? How do you raise your vibration? What are spiritual gifts? How do you, uncover yours, and how do you step into your purpose? If you so choose to, because a lot of people, they've been seeking for their purpose and they want to live a purpose-driven life. They just don't know how, or you don't think, they're worthy of it, or or for whatever reason, it's something that they want to do, but they're blocked. Right. So, the book really just goes through that. And the detox is important because, again, it's almost like you have a cup and the cup is full with dirty water, right? I mean, first thing you gotta do is chuck it, right? And fill it up with clean water. And a lot of times, people don't do that. They have this and they just pour what they think is clean water, and it's diluted, it's muddied, and it's contaminated the whole way through. And they're wondering why things aren't changing. You gotta do the hard part, check it, purge all the things that aren't you, and then you can refill it with things that are. And I feel like that's such a good, start to introducing yourself to the life that you want,
That I loved all the ways that you explain that. And it's just so Stephanie and I actually run a quarterly liver detox. That's 7 days. And it's more food related, but we do talk about, detoxing products in your life and detoxing the clutter in your mind and all of that. And in January, we actually often run a 14-day detox. And it would be super interesting to somehow incorporate your detox, the energy detox, if that's what you would call it, alongside this. I don't know if it would bombard a person with like too much happening in their body at one time, but it almost feels like it would give you like a very clean slate in January to just like.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that do both. They do. And the reason why is because one builds on top of each other.
Yeah. You're already doing the work, right?
You're doing the work. You're already purging everything. You might as well do a bigger purge.
And a lot of people that do our detox are alumni. So they've done the food part many times in some cases. So that's not always new for people. So this would be a really nice compliment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen it go hand in hand, because the cleaner you are with what you eat, the easier things are energetically and so on and so forth. And a lot of times, like, I've seen them go hand in hand. We have a lot of people that are into health, that come from that space of wanting to, they're experiencing conditions in their life that affect them physically or restrict them, and health is their way to get some traction into resolving that. So we get a lot of that, and I've seen it work miracles when you mix both, and it's just a faster process.
Well, we'll have to talk off the air about that.
Of course.
So we mentioned that you could possibly do a quick energy clearing with us. Would this be a good time to try that?
Scanning. I can scan.
Scan.
Yeah, energy healing's there like 30 minutes to 90 minutes, and it's quiet and boring, and but this one is just like scanning. So if I'm looking at, let's say, Marnie, and I'm just checking your energy, and I'm looking at, right? So your upper chakras are clear. So it's more like throat, heart, and power center are the blocks. Speaking truth, tending your power, and of course, blockages in the heart related to that. So that's the pattern. And again, the patterns are typically indicative of what you're working on the most, or what you should be working on the most right now, what's for the highest good, what your life lessons are. And they're also a lot of times when somebody's not manifesting what they want, like typically the initial pattern that comes up are the things that are directly related to why they're not, which makes sense, because standing in your power, if you want to manifest, it's important to own your power, and we manifest more from our heart than our minds, because our hearts have a bigger electrical field. But if that's blocked, then you're not able to use the full manifestation power of that, and being able to speak your truth. Speaking is a way where we pretty much ground our intentions into the real world. When you say it, when you speak it, it's that's why sound healing is so powerful, and music moves people, sound does. So when your voice and when your throat is blocked from expressing, then that's one of the ways that you also manifest, but you can't do it fully, and they all line up together, right? For that pattern. And then for Stephanie, it's more, let's see. So yours is third eye related, right? So third eye, but then third eye, right ear, and then heart, power center, sacral. So that's an interesting that's an interesting pattern, because it's a pattern of an empath that is affected by energy coming through sound. Right's typically right, typically male, left is female. So right is, so third eye, right. So how it works, let's say somebody talks to you, male, it could be a fight, or it could be overt or covert, meaning to say someone's fighting with you and saying horrible things, right? It goes to your right ear, and now it affects your heart because it hurts your power center. It gets down in your power, and your sacral, which is your ability to create or desire and sexual stuff, right? And then the interesting part is it's your third eye. It could also be someone just is sad or feeling, shut down, and they're talking to you, and they're not even saying anything mean. They can just be talking to you, but since your voice and sound carries energy, and you're sensitive to it, you may be feeling their heartache, their ability to not stand in their power, their pain, just from their speaking, because your third eye is open. So now you're experiencing what they're experiencing in those areas, even if they're just saying, I'm doing good, but they're not really doing good. You're tuning in and feeling all their trauma, right? Or it could even be something to where, somebody in the past is saying negative stuff about your gift or third eye, or they're afraid of it, and it affects your belief system, and you're feeling it. So just a lot of different reasons why that pattern comes up, and I'm giving like the most common ones that I've seen that people could probably relate with. But your pattern is more empathic in nature, right? That's the entry point, is literally you being an empath and going to your and not to say that that's the only block, but for some reason that's the block that's apparent right now for you to pay attention to and work through, right? That makes
Very
sense. So those are like, and again, even though it's some similarities in what's blocked, the inception point for Stephanie is third eye and ear, whereas Marnie, if I were to guess, for you it's more of a direct interaction, like either environment, or it's more of like, it's not so much third eye related, or it's more of like an event or trauma or some interaction related, when those things aren't aren't blocked, or you could have done work on them to where they're not showing up anymore, and that's the only thing that's showing up. But that's
what's really interesting is that I have a book that's literally launching next week, all about finding my voice and all about speaking my truth and stepping into my authentic self, which I've done a ton of work on. So it's interesting that you're saying it's still blocked, because I feel like it's so unblocked from where it was.
Well, wait till you launch it. Because when you launch a book, a lot of healing comes up.
Yes.
We thought we were done healing certain areas of our life till we launched the book. Then things come up and I'm like, oh, there you go. And it's like these lessons, they're like layers of the onion, to where, like, when you do something, and that's the thing, like, we've like literally, there are things to where I have not even thought about in 20 years. And when you launch a book, it's all about, it's different level. It's being now you're being seen. Now your work is out in the world. Now you could be attacked, or you can be judged. All these different things come to where you're like, you aren't experiencing that pre-launch, post-launch you are, right? Yeah. So I feel like even though we've worked on lessons, I feel like a video game, there's levels to those lessons. For example, surrender. It's easy to surrender when you have nothing left to lose. When you're rock bottom and you are there and you're like, nothing's working, surrender is easy, because what do you have to lose, right? But when you have a lot, and you're jumping from good to great, and all of a sudden, you could lose stuff, and you've got stuff on the line. Surrender is much more difficult, but the lesson is still there, and there's different, and it progressively, challenges you more and more. But I feel like with lessons, they're never really fully done. There's higher and higher versions of it, and a lot of times when I'm tapping into people's blockages, is just where there's a lot of energy happening in that area right now, right? It can be a block, or it can be overactive, where there's just so much activity happening as well. So, and that can also be a block, because if it's overactive, then it can cross imbalance as well. So it can be blocks. It can be just so much active, there's so much activity happening in that area. It can be a lot of different things, right? But that's your pattern. And now you at least know that whatever phase you're in life right now, that's the important part to pay attention to. Opening your heart more, speaking your truth even more, stepping in your power even more in everything that you do.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Of course.
I thought that was so timely when Oliver, when you said that, I was thinking the same thing that you were. So, gosh, there's so much more we want to talk about with your book and all the techniques and everything, Oliver, that you have in there. Maybe we could talk a little bit, as we start to wrap this up, just like practical techniques, strategies. We love leaving our listeners with some tips, if you will, to help them, identify and release blockages. You've already kind of shared a couple things, but even like aligning your energy around the mindset. So if you want to attract more abundance or love or just purpose in your life, anything like practical that someone could do within the next, say 24 hours.
I mean, yeah, it's really good. I mean, because a lot of times when you think of abundance, you're thinking of something step by step. What can I do? But a lot of times when I say abundance, sometimes it can be, it can boil down to people sometimes are good at giving, but they're terrible at receiving. But yeah, it can, because they have a closed heart to receiving. It can be as simple as when somebody gives you a compliment, do you fully receive it? When somebody gives you a gift, do you fully receive, or are you kind of awkward, or you're like, oh yeah, you look good too? You gotta find a way to you can't versus like taking a breath and
really hard. Like I definitely
really hard.
Like when you say that I need to open my heart, I for sure have that problem. I struggle to take a compliment. I always want to turn it back to the other person, deflect it. Like it's really, because you don't want to be cocky. You don't want to be like, oh, thanks. Like,
yeah. And how you, and a lot of times how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're not wanting to receive compliment, and that's what you're conscious of, what do you think you're doing on an unconscious level when abundance? If you have way too much abundance that comes that you're not ready for, that you think you didn't work hard for, or it's like too good to be true, you didn't do the steps for, and you're like, I don't know, I don't want to look like, all those things come in. And a lot of people at times unconsciously push abundance away because of the rules around abundance. So abundance is a loaded thing. I can talk about this for days. I mean, it's your openness to receive, your relationship with receiving. It is definitely your rules around abundance. Is it hard work? You have to spend 5-10 years to get there, right? It could be worthiness or adequacy issues. It can be you losing people. Like if your parents or you don't like rich people, if they're like money is the root of all evil kind of thing, then if you become abundant, who will you lose? Right? Or if you become abundant, will that require you to be a different version of you? And by doing that, would you lose a partner? Would you lose your community? Would you lose an identity? Would you lose love and connection in some way? If some people are used to their parents loving on them, taking care of them because they're always needing help. So if all of a sudden you're good and you don't need help and you're abundant, does that mean you lose that form of love and connection that you feel when people are like, are you okay? Can I help you? So there's that. There is your reaction to abundance. When you look at a bill, do you cringe? Right? Do you like, oof, and then all of a sudden what you want now is associated with a cringe or something negative, which puts you in a polar energetic vibration from that which you want, which makes like two magnets of the same side. You just can't get it. So when it comes to abundance, it's a loaded topic. But a good start is like working on somebody gives you a compliment, take a deep breath and be like, I fully receive it. Thank you. And try to receive it. Right. And when you do something for yourself, like self-care, don't guilt yourself for it. When you receive a gift, enjoy it. Like try to actually enjoy the things that are coming to you, that are blessings, that are good, instead of being like, negate, deflect, give a gift back. Can you just focus on fully receiving into your heart and breathing it in? What you don't even have to say, I receive it. You can just be in your heart, I receive it internally. You can say it internally, but really breathing that in and allowing the energy to fully be received and accepted without resistance. There's so much abundance wise, but again, sounds so simple. It's not 67 steps and you're in the journey. It's a simple one, but it's hard to implement, but makes a big difference.
Wow. I can resonate with so much like what you said. I think this is really helpful. I think we may have to have you come on for a part 2 just to talk about abundance, honestly, because it is something that I think Marnie and I, I mean, honestly, with our clients and people we interact with in our community, I think this could help so many people. And I think a lot of women who are our followers, you know, largely, not entirely, struggle with this, you know, just so. Gosh,
and children too. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my teenagers. Even if I'm giving them a compliment, one of them a compliment, I notice that they do what I do. They deflect it. Oh, well, you too, mom, or, you know, but I want to teach them at their age now. I love what you just said about just like taking a breath and saying like, I hear you, or I receive it, or thank you, or whatever it is. And just like really taking that in. I think that's a really good lesson to learn. And the younger you are, the better.
And
absolutely.
The cool thing about you, you know, them copying you, guess what? As you do this and embody it, they're going to copy the new version of you.
Right.
That's the beauty of being a parent, is you are their role model and environment. So as you shift and grow, they follow along, you know?
Look, it seems like this all goes back to like feeling worthy and shame. Like I don't deserve the compliment. I'm not really pretty, athletic, whatever the compliment is, you know, like we don't feel like we deserve it. And then we completely, you know, go to someone else who we think is better than us or whatever. So anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. But it can be shame, or it can even be your rules around it. Someone might be like, hey, you did a good job. And you might be like, oh, typically I do a good job when I am tired and I've worked for 2-3 years and I feel like I'm getting sick and I've given it my all. And I know I've given it my all. Then someone says, good job. I can be like, okay, thank you. But gosh, I just did, you know, 2 days of work and I'm not even near depletion. So I don't think you do a good job. So I'm rejecting it, not because you're inadequate, but your rule of how it has to look like doesn't match the situation.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So I do know that we have to wrap this up, but I have one question I just am so wanting to ask you.
Yep.
I'm curious what you think about mental telepathy, and if you think that we as a collective are like headed in that direction as more and more people are kind of like opening up that third eye and opening their minds more and having, I feel like people are having more energetic experiences than I ever remember hearing about as a child. And maybe that's because I was in the US, but I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I think it's our natural state. I think it's the opposite. I think everybody at birth, like, you know, we have access to that and we're closer to that and we're doing that. But through life, we're exposed to so many different, you know, external factors, whether it's trauma, whether it's like, you know, Wi-Fi, radio towers, whatever, whether it's geographic, you know, stress, you know, the air, the chemicals that we eat, like, and which, you know, the entire way we live, which puts our body and system in fight or flight and primal, making it harder to access what's supposed to be natural for us, because now our energy is being put to treading water and surviving and putting out fires that all these external factors put in, to where now, you know, instead of us having 100% of the time being connected to our intuition, now we're spending 99% of our time just staying afloat, and not even to add the, you know, the stresses, the lack of abundance, or the bills, or the heartache. Now when you throw all of that in, the, you know, the human that was supposed to come here and give their gift and live their purpose now spends most of their life just getting out of the rat race, mentally, emotionally, energetically, and then calling it a life, right? So I don't think it's something that we're heading towards. I think it's something that we're born with, that gets buried, that we're having to do detoxes and getting into spiritual awakening so we can be in touch with what's natural, but it's become very foreign to all of us.
So it almost seems like instead of like going in that direction, we are coming back to
absolutely
our true essence. And
look
going
at the stories,
backwards, which I've been saying. I mean, even just like with the earth and how we treat the earth and the foods that we eat, you know, let's get back to like who we were sort of all here.
Look at the stories that we had back in the day. Like if you look at all these stories of, you know, humans lived longer, you know, we were taller, you know, they can do things that we can't do now. It seems like back in the day when there was not a lot of these environmental factors messing with us, that we could do more. we had more access to the abilities back in the day. And as as we could become more modern, things have become more modernized with technology, with everything, all of a sudden it's just we just lose more and more and more and more in touch with what was easily done back in the day, right? And now when we hear those stories, we're like, whoa, wow, too good to be true, or that's crazy. But we don't realize that could be us in our natural peak form, right? But we just can't. It's too far out of our concept of reality. Therefore, we think it's, based with that, mixed with, the culture making things super unattainable, we think it's outside of us, that we have to work for it and die for it to be there, versus like, that's our natural space. You just have to be able to return to it, tap into it. And when you do, you'll be blown away with what people can access. And if you want to go down the rabbit hole, I mean, they classify documents from CIA from 30, 40 years ago, and you can look at it, it's public domain, of all the experiments they've done with remote viewing, with studying intuition, with studying people that had gifts. It's not something that's sci-fi, it's public government documents. They classified doing it 30, 40 years ago. They've existed. It's just that, again, it's not, it's not being taught. It's not something that's normalized. It's something that's, fantasized. It's like a sci-fi and a movie and all these different things, to where you start thinking that it's outside of you versus, something that you were born with.
It's actually inside you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Super interesting. I know.
Oh, wow.
I know we need to wrap this up, and we would love for you to share with our listeners where people can find you. You mentioned you have a retreat center, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, retreat center, typically we do events in them, but most of our events we do virtually, or we have actually outgrown the retreat center, so we're looking at bigger venues. But we do have a retreat center for people that they go through our certification classes, and we do most of them in the retreat center. But find me, it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Spiritual Activator. I mean, I post most of the best stuff that I have in there. And there's like hundreds and hundreds of hours of like literally my best stuff, because my goal is to spread the knowledge and make it mainstream, make it to where it's accessible. So my best stuff is out there for free. And if you follow me on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or even YouTube, and just go on a binge, then you'll learn a lot of the actual practical techniques, tools that you can use daily. And when you use them, you experience a difference same day or when you do them as well. So I give a lot of my best stuff that gets quick results. They're all out there online for free.
Amazing.
Well, I mean, you're just so generous with all of your talents and gifts and insight that you're sharing with the world. So thank you for that. And Oliver, one final question we love to ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
The art of living well, I feel, is shooting for, even if it's 1% better every single day, doesn't matter. Like, are you, and it can be like today you felt like, you were talking negatively to yourself, and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna say something, one thing positive. Or you're like, I don't like self-care, but let me do it even just for a minute. It's like this 1% might seem like they're incremental changes, because a lot of times people beat themselves up when they're like, I want to go all in. I want to do 200% better in a day, but you don't understand the power of compound. If you do 1% better a day, and that's all you focus on for 365 days in a year, I forget we did the math. If you compound, it's like 3,000 to 4,000%, something crazy better than you were day one, right? Not just 200% better, like you're exponentially better. And all you're focusing on is something like, can I be 1% better today in any area of life, any, right? So I feel like once you have that and you're focused on just, you know what, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. It can look different. It can be like, shoot, today I want to force myself to work, but you know what, I'm gonna sleep in or give myself rest because I want to take care of my body. That can be 1% better. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just like in any area that you want. It can be like, you know what, today I normally don't read, I'm gonna read 5 pages. Or I normally read 5, I'm gonna read 5.5. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be a little bit. So 1% in any area that you feel inspired. It could be like, shoot, typically I don't take breaks, I'm gonna watch a comedy. Right.
Mm.
And I won't judge myself for it. You know what I mean? It can be those things. It doesn't have to be something like, something ridiculous. It can be in any area.
Okay, I love
love
that you said the comedy and just like taking a break, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we think we have to be doing something to get to
Yep.
that 1% or whatever it's compounded for the year, but actually doing less can be more fulfilling and give you more. So,
And it
or
doesn't
doing-
have to be anything intense. I mean, it can
Mm-mm.
be something simple. Like you said, reading a half a page more than you normally would. Like,
Right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely. And people miss out on that part of like, it can really be so simple to where
mhm.
everybody can win. Everybody.
Yeah.
And it's free.
And it's free.
Yes. Thank you so much, Oliver, for your time today. This has been just truly like enlightening and really fun and energizing conversation. So we look forward to having you back on.
I look forward to it. Stephanie, Marnie, thank you so much for having me.
Enjoy that new baby.
Yeah.
I will.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.